Hello, my name is Marianne and I'm an alcoholic. I'd like to welcome you to Recovery in Action Life on Life's Terms. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're glad you're all here, especially newcomers. In keeping with our singleness of purpose and our third tradition, which states that the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking, we ask that all who participate confine their discussions to their problems with alcohol. This is an open Big Book step study meeting where we discuss the 12 steps of recovery as they are written in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, with the focus on their application in everyday life in recovery. This is the 9th session of the 5th cycle of the workshop that was presented on March 30th, 2024, where we completed steps 8 and 9. Next week, we'll continue with step 10. If you would like to contribute to the 7th tradition, you may do so using the QR codes displayed. Contributions are applied towards the group's expenses and support our service offices. Recordings of the workshop are available, and if you would like to be placed on the distribution list, please send an email to recoveryinaction462@gmail.com to receive the links. These links are unlisted and not public. I request that you not share them at the public level or post on any social media sites. The workshop typically begins with a brief meditation in which an inspirational music video is played. Because of copyright restrictions, it cannot be on the video. However, a link is provided, and I suggest you take a minute, view the video, and take a brief meditation for yourself before you begin the workshop. As the recording begins, the workshop is already in session. Feel free to contact me if you have any additional questions or require my assistance further. I hope you enjoy the workshop. Another custom of this group is to start the workshop by saying the full version of the Serenity Prayer. We're all familiar with the first part, but many of us are unaware that there is a second part to it, and I believe it's this second part of the prayer that reflects what recovery is all about. So if you would all please join me in the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace, taking as he did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen. So for being an alcoholic, I will never be cured of alcoholism, but I can be recovered of the obsession that keeps telling me that it's okay to drink and makes me never stop wanting to thinking about wanting to drink. And where we get started in doing that is in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is the book of instructions on how to work the 12 steps. And the 12 steps are the instructions of how to get rid of the things blocking us off from our higher power, to get connected to God, and how to stay surrendered from whatever is making our life unmanageable. Okay, so that's what we're doing, is we're looking at how do we work these steps, because merely reading the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous without experiencing it is useless. You just read it. It's just words. And you can't learn how to do anything by just reading the instructions. You don't assemble a table, for example, by just reading the instructions. You have to take the parts and fit them together and do whatever the instructions say. And that's what we're doing here. The only way to learn how to swim is to jump in the water and practice and practice and practice. So when we start getting into this, we're looking at the cover page of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which states that this is the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. And the next question begging to be answered, well, what do we mean by recovered? The definition is that, one definition is that the problem is removed. I don't have to make a choice whether I drink or not because I'm not even thinking about it. I automatically turn to God instead of alcohol when I'm upset. Alcohol is no longer an option to solve any of my problems. Unselfishness and self centeredness are gone. I'm no longer angry, fearful, or harmful. My old destructive ways of thinking and acting have been replaced by new peaceful ones. And another definition comes from the 10th step promise, which is on page 84, because this has now become a way of life. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time, sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. This is the miracle of it. We're not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We haven't even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It doesn't exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That's our experience. That's how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. And then we go to page 27, which defines recovered as ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the uh, guiding forces of the lives of these men are suddenly cast aside to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. Then, when we look at the appendix in the spiritual experience, it gives a description of recovered as the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different forms. And then when we go to the forward to the first edition, it states, we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. It later goes on to say that the only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. However, the desire to stop drinking is not the only requirement to become recovered. There's other things involved, such as being willing and actually doing everything that the big book says to do. So that's where we started. And the first thing that we did was we started at step one. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable, which, as a real alcoholic, the only thing that self knowledge does is make me realize that I cannot take one drink without being physically driven to take another. So, therefore, I have to remember that it's not enough for me to just know that I'm an alcoholic. I have to be connected to my higher power. And that's what brings me to step two. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And the insanity that we're talking about in the second step is the insanity of picking up the first drink. Because when we pick up that first drink, we do not have alcohol in our body. But once we pick it up, we give in to the mental obsession, which then, once the alcohol gets into our body, it triggers the physical compulsion, the allergy. And then once I start, I can't stop. So that is the insanity that we're talking about when it comes to the second step. Then we were at step three. We made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. And that is just the decision. And the decision that we make in step three is that now we're going to do the work that is required in order for us to become recovered. And the first part about that work starts with step 4. But in step 3, we're offering ourselves to God. And then that brings us to step 4, where we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. We're starting to look at, this is what I'm working with, God. Now, how can I use this to help you? And we start with 4 inventories, and all of these forms are available both in the workbook, and they're available on the Google Drive if you prefer to download them as Word documents. But you have your resentment inventory, your fears inventory, and 2 harms inventories. One has to do with our general behavior of harms, excluding our sex behavior, and the other has to do with the harms that we cause from our sex behavior. And when we got into the inventories, we found that in most cases, our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relations, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So on our grudge list, we set opposite each name what our injuries were. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations that had been interfered with? And all of these were parts of the self. It was all about me, my self-esteem, how I feel about myself, my pride, my pocketbook, my money or my finances, my emotional security, my ambitions, my plans for the future, my personal relationships, how I interact with others, and my sex relations. And that came down to 5 basic character defects, in that I was dishonest, I was frightened, I was selfish, I was self-seeking. Wait a minute, I messed up. No, this is we were looking at where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened. And even though it might not have been our fault, we tried to disregard the other person entirely and look at where we were to blame. And this is on page 67. Then it came down to 5 main character defects, in that I was selfish, I was dishonest, I was self-seeking, I was frightened, and I was inconsiderate. And then these are the 5 main character defects. And then we had a list of some additional character defects, which broke it down even more. Then once we got all of our inventories complete, we were at step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. We went over all of these lists of character defects with our sponsor, and then we were at step 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all of these defects of character. And then step 7 was where we humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. And this is the prayer. This is where we start to say, okay, God, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, the good and the bad. And I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character that stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. This is where God starts to do the work on us. We don't get all of our character defects lifted at once, nor will they be. But this is where we're going to God, and we're allowing ourselves to be continuously nudged in the right direction. And that nudge from God comes from our prayers. Each morning, we ask God to stop us from being that character defect and replace it with the asset. And we do each one individually. So we would say, for example, please, God, stop me from being lazy and teach me to be someone who does what is needed to be done immediately. Please stop me from being jealous and teach me to be happy for others. So throughout the day, this is the walking around stuff. throughout the day, when these character defects creep up, we immediately stop, take a deep breath, ask God to stop us from doing that and teach us to be whatever the opposite is. And then we act as if we're someone who has that character asset. Remember that God is not going to remove them immediately. He's going to allow us time to practice. Nature abhors a vacuum. So if it's removed right away, you might not have the right thing to replace it with, and it could be something that might not enhance your life. It could easily bring you to another addiction or to another program. So remember that God will give you opportunities to practice the character asset when he thinks you've learned enough. And then he'll remove it. The use of step 7 in step 10 is where the remaining character defects get removed. That's where we start learning, but we're not there yet. But this is just to explain that. Because we live our lives shaped by our habits. And the habit is the past action that's repeated over and over and over again, that it happens automatically. And we don't even realize it. It's just the way we are. And that's where we talk about how in alcoholics, especially in us, everybody has a fight or flight response. But in alcoholics, that fight or flight response gets triggered so easily. And our character defects have been repeated so often that they're automatic and they're an unconscious response to having a part of ourselves hurt, threatened, or interfered with. They come into play to protect us, and it might have been useful at some point in our life, but now as adults, they cause us problems. And this is where we talked about the reactivity, that when we react to everything around us, we react. Something happens and we right away react and make up a story in our head that they're talking about us, they're doing it to us, they're doing this, they're doing that, because we're reactive. It's an automatic knee-jerk reaction. We have to learn to be proactive, where we separate that stimulus from the response and we pause. And when we pause, we go into this decision-making model of the circle of concern. And that's the large circle, which represents everything I could have a concern about. And the smaller circle, which represents the things that I can influence. The things that I can influence are the things in which I have some power and control. So if I'm focusing my time and energy on all of my imagined reactions to life around me, I'm going to be out here in the circle of concern, and I'm going to be stressed out, and I'm going to be miserable. I want to focus my time and my energy on this smaller circle where I have some power and control. And an interesting dynamic occurs when I do this. It causes the circle to grow, which cuts down on the circle of concern. So whenever anything goes on, I ask myself, is there anything I can do about this right now, this minute? If it falls in this circle, I have to accept it because I can't do anything about it. If it falls in this circle, then I can influence it. I need to do it, whatever it is right now, this minute, so that I'm focusing my time and my energy on a place where I have some power and control. And this actually boils down to the serenity prayer. God grant me this serenity to accept the things I cannot change. That's the stuff out here that I have to accept because I can't do anything about it. Other people, places, and things that I have no control over. They're going to do what they do. The courage to change the things I can. That's the stuff within this smaller circle. And the wisdom to know the difference between the two, which is where I get in trouble. I think I can change things that are out here that I can't. And I don't realize that I can change some things that are in here. I can change all things in here because they wouldn't be in there if I couldn't change it. But some of those things might be tough decisions. So what that does is it brings me back here to being proactive, where I get the stimulus, I pause, And when I'm in this circle, I have freedom to choose, which is based on the 4 endowments of the human personality of self-awareness. This is where I know I'm an alcoholic. Imagination, think the drink through. What else can I do? My conscience, which tells me what it's my decision-making tool, which tells me, okay, what is the best solution based on my imagination of what I've thought up in my head. And then my independent will is where I have a choice. And that's what's going to give me my response. And basically, that's how the serenity prayer comes into play, how we can use this as the walking around prayer. How many times I walked around just saying this over and over in my head, God, grant me the serenity. And that's step 7. And the use of step 7 and step 10 teaches us not to react inappropriately to everyday situations that we might misinterpret as being threatening. This is where I get into trouble because everyday situations happen. I misinterpret them as being about me, and therefore I'm in trouble. So that's step 7. That's how step 7 works. So step 7 teaches us the things that are unmanageable in our lives, the things that upset us, the things we're afraid of. And all of them are caused by our distortion of what's actually going on around us, our giving more credit and attention to these things than they deserve, and then having our character defects come into play to try and protect us, which brings us now to steps 8 and 9, which are used to correct the wreckage of the past. And step 8 is made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. And now on page 76, we're looking at, we have the list of all the persons we have harmed and to whom we're willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. We subjected ourselves to drastic self-appraisal. We have these people on our harms list. We have these people on our resentment list. It's all there. So anybody who ever told you to take your 4th step and burn it was not doing you a service, because you need that list when you're doing your 8th step. So you've got those list of names. So the way you do this now is you look at your harms inventories and you look at columns 1 and 2. And then you write those people's names on index cards. So you would use a separate index card. So you would take one index card, and if you have 5 harms to that one person, you would make up 5 extra cards. You'd take one card and write the first name that of the person you have listed in column 1, and then underneath their name you write what you wrote in column 2, how you harmed them. And then on the same card you transfer what you wrote in column 4 part A for what you should have done, and also add what you wrote in column 4 for part B, what you will do if you find yourself in the same situation again. And you do this for all your harms. You do this for all the harms that you have listed, so that you have your harms with everybody's names written on them. So now it's going to look like this. This is an example. I put on here, this department store is no longer in business. But this is a harms example of for an institution, buying a stolen skirt and sweater from a shoplifter. So what I'm going to do differently is I'm not going to buy stolen merchandise, and I'm going to pay for the things I want and not take what doesn't belong to me. So that's one example for a teenager that might have bought a stolen skirt and sweater. The second example shows a harm where you wouldn't speak to the person because it would cause more harm. So this particular person, someone that we might have had an affair with their husband or wife. So we would list that person because we did them a harm. And what we did was we had an affair with their spouse. The thing that we would do differently is not date married people. And what we're going to do in the future is only date people who are not in relationships and are available. So then you would, again, going back to this example, you want to do the same thing for all of the index cards. So this is the first one, and we've taken it a little bit further because we have to make restitution. So that in this particular instance, the person would donate $20 to a charity because that particular institution has been out of business for many years. And then what we do is that's why we write what that restitution will be. What are you going to do in order to correct what it is that you did? And you're going to do the same thing for all of those index cards. And then you take all of these together with your sponsor and you review them together. Step 8 is about making your list and becoming willing to set right the wrongs of the past. And no other action is done other than praying for the willingness to do what you need to do in step 9, going over your index cards with your sponsor so that you can see how you're going to make your 9th step apologies and restitution. And to whom and how you will do this is to ensure that you are not creating any further harms. And part of this, as you do this, if you're getting ready to do your step 9, if there are any that you have any concerns about, or you're not really comfortable with, or you really don't want to approach that person, it's not that it's going to harm them, it's just that you're uncomfortable or you're feeling guilty or you just don't like this person, you don't want to see them, I suggest that you sit down and you role play that amend with your sponsor and let your sponsor play the role of that person. And then you practice what it is that you're going to say to them. Okay, so that finishes up step 8. And now where we are is step 9. Now, I have a relatively interesting introduction to step 9 for those of you who might remember. In step 9, I use a little introduction for anyone who might have seen Seinfeld. I use the scene from Seinfeld where George expects to get an apology from his one friend who he's now heard is in the program and making his 9th step amends. So here we go. In step 9, it states on page 76, now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris which has accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. Now, remember, the one thing about step 9 is we are not others. We don't fall in the others category, although we still may need to have ourselves on our list. And there's also some discussion around that. Some people say, yeah, you shouldn't put yourself on the list. Other people say you should put yourself on the list. I think it's up to you. I think just the process of doing steps 8 and 9 were in a way making amends to ourselves. I know I heard an example of one woman's step 9 to herself, which was very, very short. She said she looked at herself in the mirror and said, "I'm very sorry for every stupid, foolish, hurtful thing that I've done. And in the future, I'm going to take really good care of us and not do anything that would cause us to feel bad or cause harm about ourselves or to ourselves." And that was the end of it, except for actually taking care of herself. And that's the whole thing about the steps is it's very, very simple that way. What step 9 is about is cleaning up the harms that we've caused other people and focusing on them. Um, and one of the main results is, if the steps are done correctly, it's that we stop being selfish and self-centered and self-seeking and self-pitying, self-focused, self-depreciating, or any other self word that you can think of. In step 9, we don't focus on ourselves, we focus on others. We can't undo the harm that has been done to other people. We cannot erase the pain that we've caused. But making rather admitting the hurtful behavior doesn't release us from the responsibility for that behavior. We still have to set things right. So we start making our step 9 amends using pages 76 through 83 of the Big Book as a guide. And how we do this, there's some key points listed here from those pages. And the first one from page 77 says, "We do not criticize or argue." Then on page 78, "Other people's faults are not discussed." Also on page 78, "We do not dodge our creditors." Then on page 79, it states, "Reminding ourselves that we have decided to go to any lengths to find a spiritual experience, we ask that we be given strength and direction to do the right thing, no matter what the personal consequences might be." And then on page 81, it states we have no right to involve another person. On page 83, it states, asking each morning in meditation that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindness, and love. Also on 83, there may be some wrongs we can never fully right. We do not worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves we would right them if we could. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter. We do not delay if it can be avoided. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scraping. And this last one is my very favorite. As God's people, we stand on our own feet. We do not crawl before anyone. So, two important things about step 9 are that you will not make any apologies that will cause harm, and you will start behaving differently so that you do not cause any new harms. The number 1 rule becomes no new wreckage. And I think, hold on, let me just double check on this. Yeah, although we're, now so an amend involves making restitution where appropriate. It's changing your ways, and in many cases can include an apology. An apology, however, without changing your ways or where needed, making restitution is not making amend. Saying I'm sorry and doing nothing else will not get you closer to your higher power. The main thing is to amend your ways so that you do not cause this same harm to anyone ever again. Note that the word apology comes from the Greek word apologia, meaning a speech in one's own defense. An apology without restitution or a sincere desire to change doesn't mean anything. If all you say, if I'm sorry and nothing else, all you're saying is, I hurt you, I feel bad, now you better forgive me so I can feel better. A real amend is when you focus on the other person, you truly want the hurt to be gone, and you're willing to do whatever it takes to make that happen. We do step 9 to set right the wrongs of our past, to clean up our side of the street. It's not done to rekindle a relationship nor make the other person like you. In fact, you may find a few people that are downright nasty when you attempt to do your 9th step with them. None of these circumstances matter. We do step 9 to set right the wrongs of the past or to clean up our side of the street. So once we do step 9, we're done spending any more time feeling guilty. If some of the people we've harmed choose to hold on to their pain, or if they choose to bear a grudge, even in the face of our sincere request for forgiveness, we must realize we're free from the burden of the wrong, and whatever the other person does, they do. When you've completed the previous 8 steps, you're going to be a different person than you were when you were at step 1. Each step gives you the strength to do the next. After doing step 7, some of your character defects will have either been removed or diminished, and you will have the experience of acting as if you're the opposite. And this is good because you don't react inappropriately or retaliate if any of step 9 doesn't go smoothly. When you've done step 8, you want to set right the wrongs from the past. And because you have God in your life, you begin to realize that the outcome of everything, including your step 9 amends, are totally in your higher power's hands. And by this point in your recovery, it's absolutely fine with you. And then this just brings us to the 9th step promises, which are from pages 83 and 84, which go, if we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. And what it says at the top here, it says, we will be amazed if we are painstaking about this phase of our development. That's this step. We will be amazed before we're halfway through this step. So that's where the amazement comes in. If you really read it, that's what it says. So at this point, we've finished step 9. We have a minute or so for any quick, well, we are actually at the time. Thank you so much for your participation. I hope you enjoyed the workshop, and if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. And now, please join me in our closing prayer, which is St. Faustina's prayer for mercy. Eternal God, in whom mercy is endless and the treasury of compassion inexhaustible, look kindly upon us and increase your mercy in us, that in difficult moments we might not despair nor become despondent, but with great confidence submit ourselves to your holy will, which is love and mercy itself. Amen.